They said his heart was made of ice and his city built on bones. Iphigenia Valenti, the Don of New York, feared nothing except the silence of his own children. For 2 years, his triplets, the heirs to the Valenti Empire, hadn't uttered a single sound. Doctors were baffled. Nannies were terrified. But on a rainy Tuesday night, inside a run-down diner on the edge of the city, everything changed in a heartbeat. 3 silent toddlers pointed a shaking finger at a waitress nobody knew. And then the impossible happened. They didn't just speak. They screamed a word that would shatter Iphigenia's reality and unleash a war. They called her Mum, but the woman trembling behind the counter had never seen them before. Or so she thought. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Oliver Rain wiped down the counter at Sal's 24-hour diner for the 100th time that night. The smell of stale coffee and grease had settled into her pores years ago, a second skin she couldn't scrub off. It was 2 a.m. The neon sign outside buzzed with a dying flicker, casting a sickly red glow over the few patrons scattered in the booths. Oliver was 26, but her eyes held the exhaustion of a woman twice her age. She pushed a stray lock of damp blonde hair behind her ear and checked the clock. 4 more hours. 4 more hours until she could go back to her studio apartment, stare at the ceiling, and try not to dream. Dreaming was the dangerous part. In her dreams, they were still there. 3 of them. She touched the faint silver scar on her lower abdomen instinctively. It had been 2 years, but the phantom weight was still there. She remembered the cold sterility of St. Jude's Hospital. She remembered the humiliating contract she had signed surrogacy for an anonymous, high-profile client. She needed the money to pay off her father's gambling debts to the very people who ran this city. It was supposed to be a transaction, her womb for their freedom. But she hadn't expected to love them. She hadn't expected to feel 3 distinct heartbeats, syncing with her own, for 9 months. And she certainly hadn't expected the ending. "I'm sorry, Ms. Rain." The doctor, Dr. Caldwell, had said, his face a mask of professional pity. Complications during the C-section. Stillborn, all 3. It's extremely rare, but the trauma was too great. She never saw the bodies. They told her it would be too distressing. They sedated her. When she woke up, she was in a different room. Her debt was cleared, and her arms were empty. "Hey, Space Cadet." Oliver flinched, snapping back to the diner. Sal, the owner, was chewing on a toothpick, leaning out of the kitchen window. "Table 4 needs a refill, and stop looking like you're at a funeral. Tips depend on smiles, sweetheart." "Sorry, Sal," Oliver mumbled. She grabbed the coffee pot. She didn't have a smile in her. She hadn't had a smile since that night in Ward 4. She walked toward Table 4, where a trucker was nursing a pie, but the bell above the front door chimed. It wasn't a gentle tinkle. The door was thrown open with force. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly. The air grew heavy, charged with static. The trucker at Table 4 put his head down. The couple in the corner booth suddenly found their menus very interesting. Oliver looked up and froze. 6 men entered. They wore suits that cost more than this entire building. They moved with the synchronized lethality of a wolf pack. But it was the man in the center who sucked the oxygen out of the room, Iphigenia Valenti. Oliver had never met him, but everyone knew the face. It was plastered on the news, usually next to words like alleged investigation and acquitted. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained against his charcoal suit. His hair was black, slicked back, revealing a face carved from granite-sharp jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. But what made Oliver's breath hitch wasn't the man or the guns bulging under the bodyguards' jackets. It was the stroller. It was a triple stroller, sleek and black, pushed by a terrified-looking nanny, who looked like she was about to faint. Iphigenia Valenti. The Capo dei Capi had brought his children into a greasy spoon diner at 2 a.m. "Clear the back," Iphigenia said. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. It wasn't a request. Two of his guards immediately moved to the back section, guiding the few customers there to leave. They didn't argue. They left cash on the table and scrambled out the door. Iphigenia pointed to the large corner booth. "There." The nanny maneuvered the stroller. Iphigenia sat down, looking exhausted. He rubbed his temples, his ruthless mask slipping for just a fraction of a second to reveal a father at his wits' end. "Coffee," Iphigenia barked, not looking up. "Black." Sal was already hiding in the kitchen. He hissed at Oliver. "You go. I ain't going out there. That's the Valenti crew." Oliver's hands trembled. She gripped the coffee pot. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll go." She took a breath, steeling herself. She was just a waitress. To men like that, she was furniture. Invisible. She just had to pour the coffee and walk away. She walked across the checkered floor, the silence of the diner amplifying her footsteps. She approached the booth. "Coffee," she said softly. Iphigenia didn't look at her. He was staring at the stroller. "Leave the pot." Oliver placed the pot on the table. Her eyes drifted to the stroller. She knew she shouldn't look. She knew it was dangerous to pry. But she couldn't help it. She looked down. 3 pairs of eyes looked back. They were toddlers, maybe 2 years old. They had dark curls like their father. But their eyes were a piercing, familiar blue. A blue she saw every morning in her bathroom mirror. Oliver felt the room spin. The coffee pot slipped from her hand. Smash. Glass shattered. Hot coffee splattered across the floor, missing Iphigenia's Italian leather shoes by an inch. The sound was like a gunshot. Instantly, 3 guns were pointed at Oliver's head. Iphigenia Valenti didn't flinch at the sound of breaking glass. He didn't even reach for his weapon. His guards, Rocco and Silas, had that covered. He looked up, slowly, annoyed. "Do you have a death wish, or are you just incompetent?" The waitress was hyperventilating. She was pressed against the neighboring booth. Her hands raised, her face pale as a sheet. She was looking at the guns, but then her eyes darted back to the stroller. I'm sorry," she stammered. Her voice was melodic, raspy. "It slipped. I'll clean it. Please." Iphigenia signaled with 2 fingers. The guards lowered their weapons but didn't holster them. "Get a mop," Iphigenia said coldly. "And get a new pot." He turned his attention back to his sons, Roman Gabriel and Julian. God, he was tired. It had been 2 years of hell. His wife, his arrangement, had died on the table. Or so he was told. He hadn't been there. He had been in Italy settling the score with the Rossi family. By the time he returned, the surrogate was gone, the agency was closed, and he was handed 3 infant boys and a death certificate for the mother. He had raised them alone. He had given them everything. The best toys, the safest penthouses, an army of protection. But they were broken. At 2 years old, they hadn't spoken a word. Not Dada, not Baba, nothing. They were silent observers of his violent world. Specialists told him it was trauma, or perhaps a genetic defect. They screamed, they cried, but they never spoke. It was a weakness, and in his world, weakness was a death sentence. Tonight had been the worst. The new nanny, Miss Halloway, had tried to put them to bed, and they had gone into a frenzy, screaming, throwing things inconsolable. Iphigenia had driven them around the city for 3 hours just to get them to settle down. The vibration of the engine was the only thing that worked. He was hungry. He was angry. And now there was coffee on his shoes. "Nanny," Iphigenia snapped. "Check them. Make sure no glass hit them." The nanny, a young woman named Elise, was shaking. "Yes, Mr. Valenti." She reached into the stroller to check Roman, the eldest. Roman slapped her hand away. It was a sharp, aggressive motion. The boy glared at the nanny. His little brow furrowed with a rage that mirrored Iphigenia's own. He doesn't want me to touch him," Elise whispered, terrified. "Useless," Iphigenia muttered. He watched the waitress return with a mop. She was on her knees, scrubbing the coffee. He watched her. She was thin, too thin. Her uniform was old. But there was something about the way she moved, graceful despite the fear. She kept glancing at the boys. It was irritating him. "Stop staring at them," Iphigenia warned, his voice low. The waitress froze. She looked up, and for the first time Iphigenia locked eyes with her. Blue. Electric blue. He felt a strange jolt in his chest, a sense of déjà vu he couldn't place. "I wasn't staring," she whispered. They look sad." Iphigenia laughed, a cruel, dry sound. "They're Valenti blood. We don't get sad, we get even. Finish cleaning and get out of my face." Oliver nodded and stood up. She wrung out the rag. She turned to walk away. And then it happened. The middle triplet, Gabriel. The quietest one, the one the doctors worried about the most, reached out. His small, chubby hand grabbed the edge of Oliver's apron. Iphigenia froze. His guards tensed. Nobody touched the staff. The boys never touched strangers. They hated strangers. They barely tolerated Iphigenia. Oliver stopped. She looked down at the small hand gripping her stained white apron. She turned slowly. Gabriel was looking up at her. His eyes were wide, filled with a sudden devastating recognition. His bottom lip trembled. Tears began to pool in his eyes, but they weren't tears of a tantrum. They were tears of relief. Then Roman reached out, then Julian. All 3 boys were straining against their stroller straps, reaching for this random waitress with the sad eyes. Iphigenia stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "Let go of her," he ordered his son. "Gabriel, release." Gabriel ignored his father. He pulled on the apron harder. Oliver dropped the mop. She didn't care about the guards. She didn't care about the Don. She fell to her knees right there in the spilled coffee and glass. She reached out her hands, shaking, and cupped Gabriel's face. "Oh, God," she whispered. The scent hit her. Beneath the expensive baby powder and the city rain, she smelled it. That specific scent she had dreamed of. "Sir Rocco." The head of security stepped forward, hand on his gun. "She's too close. I should—" "Wait," Iphigenia ordered. He was watching his sons. They had stopped crying. The frantic energy that had plagued them all night was gone. They were calm. They were staring at her face as if she were the sun, and they had been living in the dark. Gabriel took a deep, shuddering breath. He opened his mouth. Iphigenia expected a scream. Instead, a voice, rusty, unused, but clear as a bell, cut through the silence of the diner. "Mum!" Iphigenia's heart stopped. Roman echoed it louder. "Mum! Mum!" Julian started kicking his legs, chanting it. "Mum! Mum!" The waitress, this stranger, didn't pull away. She didn't look confused. She burst into tears. She buried her face in their small hands, sobbing, her shoulders shaking violently. "I knew it," she choked out. "I knew you weren't gone. I knew it." Iphigenia Valenti felt the world tilt on its axis. He pulled his gun. "Nobody moves," he roared. The diner went dead silent, except for the sound of the waitress weeping and his mute sons chanting the one word he had been told they would never have a reason to say. The barrel of the .45 was pointed directly at the space between Oliver's eyes. She didn't care. For 2 years, she had been a ghost. A hollow shell walking through a grey world. Now colour had returned. The warmth of Gabriel's hand on her cheek was the only reality that mattered. "Step away from my children," Iphigenia said. His voice was terrifyingly calm, which made it worse. "I will not ask twice." Oliver sniffed, wiping her nose with her sleeve. The maternal instinct that had been dormant for 2 years flared up, overriding her fear of the gun. She looked up at the Mafia Don, her blue eyes blazing with a ferocity that matched his own. "They are scared," she said, her voice shaking, but defiant. "Put the gun away. You're scaring them." Rocco, the bodyguard, gasped. Nobody ordered Iphigenia Valenti. Iphigenia blinked. He looked at his sons. Roman was glaring at him. Julian was whimpering, trying to climb out of the stroller to get to the woman. Iphigenia slowly lowered the gun, though he didn't holster it. "Who are you?" "I'm the waitress," Oliver said, standing up slowly, keeping one hand on Gabriel's arm, as if breaking contact would cause him to vanish. "My name is Oliver." "Oliver." Iphigenia tasted the name. It meant nothing to him. "Why did my sons just call you mother? Did you train them? Is this a setup? Who sent you the Russos?" "The FBI." "I don't know who you are," Oliver said, "and I don't know why they called me that. But 2 years ago I gave birth to triplets at St. Jude's. Boys. I was a surrogate. They told me they died." Iphigenia went still. The air in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. "St. Jude's," he repeated. "Dr. Caldwell," Oliver added. "He said they were stillborn." Iphigenia looked at Rocco. A silent communication passed between them. A realization. Iphigenia had used St. Jude's. He had used a private broker. He had been told the surrogate died of a hemorrhage. Someone was lying, and Iphigenia Valenti killed liars. He looked at the woman Oliver. She was poor. She was dirty. She was nothing like the polished, educated women he usually associated with. But his sons. Gabriel was holding Oliver's thumb, rubbing it against his cheek. He was peaceful. For the first time in his life, the boy looked peaceful. Iphigenia made a decision. "Rocco," he barked, "bring the car around. The SUV now." "Yes, boss." Iphigenia looked at Oliver. "You're coming with us." Oliver took a step back. "What number 1 have a shift? I can't just... You think I'm giving you a choice?" Iphigenia stepped closer, towering over her. He smelled of rain, expensive cologne, and gunpowder. "My sons just spoke their first words to you. You claim you had triplets who died at the same hospital where my sons were born. You aren't a waitress anymore, Oliver. You're a loose end. Or you're the answer." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Oliver said, looking towards the kitchen. "Sal, call the police." Sal didn't answer. The kitchen was dark. Sal was smart. He was already gone. "The police belong to me," Iphigenia said simply. "Now you can walk to the car, and we can figure this out like civilized people at my estate. Or I can throw you in the trunk. But look at them, Oliver." He pointed to the boys. "If you leave now," Iphigenia said softly, "do you think you'll ever see them again?" Oliver looked down. The 3 boys were watching her with wide, wet eyes. Roman reached out again. "Mum," he whispered, "it broke her." "I need my coat," she said, her voice defeated. "Silas will get your coat," Iphigenia said. He gestured to the door. "Walk." Oliver walked out of the diner and into the rain, flanked by men who killed for a living. As she climbed into the back of the armored black SUV, she sat next to the car seats. Iphigenia sat in the front passenger seat. "Drive," he ordered, "and get Dr. Caldwell on the phone. If he doesn't answer, go to his house. If he's not home, burn it down." As the car sped off into the dark Chicago night, Oliver felt 3 small hands reach across the divide, grasping for her. She took them. She didn't know if she was going to her death or her life, but for the first time in 2 years, she felt whole. But Iphigenia was watching her in the rear-view mirror. His eyes were calculating. He didn't believe in miracles. He believed in leverage. And he had just found the ultimate leverage. "Don't get comfortable, Oliver," he said from the front seat. "We're going to do a DNA test the second we walk through the door. And if you aren't who they think you are, you'll wish you had stayed in that diner." The Valenti estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a palace. As the SUV crunched over the gravel driveway, passing through 12-foot iron gates, Oliver pressed her face against the cold glass. She saw armed guards patrolling the perimeter with German shepherds. She saw floodlights cutting through the rain. Inside the car, the atmosphere was suffocating. The triplets had finally fallen asleep, their small hands still clutching various parts of Oliver's coat. Roman held her sleeve, Julian her pocket, Gabriel her thumb. Iphigenia hadn't said a word since they left the diner. He stared out the window, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle feathered in his cheek. The car stopped. "Don't wake them abruptly," Iphigenia commanded softly. It was the first time his voice had lost its jagged edge. Oliver nodded. "I know how to handle children, Mr. Valenti. We'll see." Getting 3 sleeping toddlers out of a car and into a strange house was a military operation. Iphigenia carried 2. Oliver carried Gabriel. As they walked through the mahogany double doors, Oliver was hit by the opulence marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art that belonged in museums. But it was cold. The house felt like a mausoleum. A frantic woman in a grey uniform rushed forward. "Mr. Valenti, you're back. I was so worried when Elise called and said, 'Not now, Martha.'" Iphigenia cut her off. "Prepare the guest suite in the East Wing, and call Dr. Aris. Tell him to get here in 10 minutes with a paternity kit and a full genetic panel." "Dr. Aris, sir. It's 3 a.m. Iphigenia turned his head slowly. "Did I stutter?" "No, sir. Right away." They took the boys to the nursery. It was larger than Oliver's entire apartment. The cribs were made of solid oak. But as Iphigenia tried to lower Roman into his crib, the boy's eyes snapped open. Panic. Instant raw panic. Roman opened his mouth and let out a blood-curdling scream, thrashing his arms. "Mum! Mum!" It woke the others. Within seconds, the nursery was a cacophony of terrified wails. They were reaching through the bars, screaming for the woman in the waitress uniform. Iphigenia looked helpless. He tried to soothe them. "Roman, stop. It's okay. Dad is here." Roman pushed him away. Oliver stepped forward. She didn't ask for permission. She pushed past the most feared man in New York and lowered the side of the crib. "Hey," she cooed, her voice dropping to a low, melodic hum. "I'm here. I'm right here." She picked Roman up. She rubbed circles on his back. She leaned over and stroked Gabriel's hair. She began to sing a song she hadn't realized she remembered, a lullaby she used to hum to her belly when she was 7 months pregnant and alone in her small room. Lavender's blue, dilly, dilly, lavender's green. The effect was instantaneous. The screaming stopped. The boys hiccuped, their breathing slowing down. They watched her with wide, wet eyes, mesmerized. Iphigenia stood in the doorway, watching. He felt a strange tightening in his chest. He had hired the best nannies in the world. None of them could do that. His sons looked at Oliver not like a stranger, but like an anchor in a storm. "They remember the song," Oliver whispered, not looking at him. "I used to sing it to them every night." Iphigenia leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "Science says fetuses can hear, but 2 years is a long time to remember a hum." "Love is louder than science," Oliver said, finally placing a sleeping Roman back down. An hour later, the house was silent. Oliver sat in the library, a massive room smelling of old paper and scotch. Dr. Arris, a nervous man with thick glasses, had just taken a swab from her cheek and blood from her arm. He had already sampled the boys. "How long?" Iphigenia asked. He was pouring a drink. He didn't offer her one. "With the rapid sequencer, 45 minutes, Dr. Arris said. "Do it." Dr. Arris retreated to his portable lab in the kitchen. Iphigenia sat opposite Oliver. The gun was on the table between them. "If the test is negative," Iphigenia said, swirling the amber liquid, "you understand what happens. You become a kidnapper, a fraud, a woman who tried to exploit my traumatized children." Oliver sat up straighter. She was exhausted. Her uniform was stained with coffee and she was terrified. But she was done being bullied. "And if it's positive," she countered. Iphigenia paused. "If it's positive, then someone stole my children's mother and told me she was dead. That means there is a traitor in my circle, and I will burn this city to the ground to find them." He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "Why did you do it, the surrogacy?" "My father," Oliver said quietly. "He owed money to a shark named Vinny the Fist. They were going to break his legs. Then they were going to take me." Iphigenia grimaced. He knew Vinny, a low-level scumbag. "So you sold your womb?" "I rented it," Oliver corrected. "I signed the papers. Anonymous donor, anonymous father. I just wanted to save my dad, but when I felt them kick, it changed. And when I woke up and they told me they were dead, I wished I had died on that table too." Iphigenia looked at the scar on her arm, a burn mark from the diner's coffee pot. He looked at her hands, rough from years of hard work. The library door opened. Dr. Arris walked in. He looked pale. He was holding a tablet. "Well," Iphigenia stood up. Dr. Arris swallowed hard. "Sir, the profile is conclusive. Read it. Maternity probability 99.99998%. Dr. Arris looked at Oliver with awe. "She isn't just the surrogate Mr. Valenti. The boys, They share her DNA markers. Half of them. The room went silent. Oliver gasped. What? Iphigenia froze. Explain. The contract was for gestational surrogacy. The egg was supposed to be from the donor. The donor egg failed, Dr. Aris stammered, or it was never used. Biologically, these children are yours, Iphigenia, and hers. Oliver is their mother, their biological mother. Iphigenia looked at Oliver. The realization hit him like a freight train. His late wife, Isabella, had been obsessed with appearances. She was infertile, but refused to admit it. She had arranged the surrogacy. She must have switched the protocol. She used Oliver's eggs because she wanted the Valenti bloodline to continue, but she never intended for Oliver to survive the transaction. Oliver covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. They're mine. They're really mine. Get out. Iphigenia whispered to the doctor. Dr. Aris fled. Iphigenia walked around the desk. He picked up the gun, but he didn't aim it. He holstered it. He looked at Oliver Rain, the waitress, the nobody. She was the mother of the Valenti heirs. He knelt in front of her chair. It was a position of submission he had never taken in his life. He took her hands. They were cold. Oliver, he said, his voice rough, you aren't leaving this house. You can't keep me prisoner, she sobbed. No, Iphigenia said, looking deep into her electric blue eyes. Not a prisoner. You are the mother of my sons. You are the only thing that makes them speak. You are under my protection now. If the world finds out you are alive, the people who lied to me, the people who tried to kill you 2 years ago, will come back to finish the job. He squeezed her hands. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Oliver looked at the man who terrified a city. She saw the desperation in his eyes. For them, she whispered. I'll do it for them. Good. Iphigenia stood up, his face hardening into the mask of the Don once more. Stay here. Lock the door. Open it for no one but me. Where are you going? Iphigenia walked to the door, checking his weapon. I'm going to pay Dr. Caldwell a visit, and I'm going to find out who signed your death warrant. Dr. Leonard Caldwell lived in a pristine, white, minimalist house in the suburbs. It was a house bought with blood money. At 4:15 a.m., the front door didn't open. It imploded. Rocco kicked the lock with such force the wood splintered inward. Iphigenia walked in over the debris, stepping calmly into the foyer. 2 other guards, Silas and Marco, fanned out to clear the rooms. Clear upstairs, Iphigenia barked. A minute later, a shriek echoed from the master bedroom. Silas dragged Dr. Caldwell down the stairs by the collar of his silk pajamas. The doctor was a small man, balding and soft. He took one look at Iphigenia Valenti standing in his living room and lost control of his bladder. Mr. Valenti, Caldwell squealed as Silas threw him onto the expensive Persian rug. Please, I have money I can pay you. Iphigenia walked over to the fireplace. He picked up a heavy iron poker. He inspected it casually. I don't want your money, Leonard. I have more money than God. Iphigenia turned. I want to know why you told me the mother of my children was dead. Caldwell's face went grey. There were complications. I thought... Whack. Iphigenia swung the poker. It connected with the coffee table, shattering the glass top into 1,000,000 diamonds. Caldwell screamed, curling into a ball. Lie to me again. Iphigenia said, his voice terrifyingly conversational, and the next swing doesn't hit the furniture. He crouched down, grabbing Caldwell's chin, forcing the man to look at him. She's alive, Leonard. She's in my house. My sons called her Mum, the sons who haven't spoken in 2 years. So here is how this goes. You tell me exactly who paid you to fake her death and steal her eggs. You tell me now, and I let you live long enough to go to prison. You hesitate, and I hand you to Rocco. And Rocco? Well, he hasn't had fun in a while. Rocco grinned from the shadows, cracking his knuckles. Caldwell was sobbing now. It was Mrs. Valenti. It was Isabella. Iphigenia froze. He had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed was a punch to the gut. Isabella, his wife. The woman he had married for alliance, not love, but whom he had respected. Explain, Iphigenia hissed. Isabella couldn't produce viable eggs. Caldwell blubbered, snot running down his face. She didn't want you to know. She was afraid you'd annul the marriage. She found the girl, Oliver. She said Oliver had the perfect genetic profile, strong, resilient, pretty. Go on. She paid me $50,000 up front to switch the donor profile. We used Oliver's eggs, but then Isabella got paranoid. She said if Oliver ever found out the babies were biologically hers, she could sue for custody. She could want money. Isabella said. She said the mother had to go. Iphigenia's blood ran cold. Isabella ordered you to kill her. No, not kill. Caldwell shook his head frantically. Just make her disappear. We told her the babies died, so she wouldn't look for them. We told you she died, so you wouldn't look for her. It was supposed to be clean. Isabella was going to raise them as her own. But Isabella died, Iphigenia said flatly. Car crash, 3 months after they were born. Yes, and I was left with the mess, Caldwell cried. I forged the death certificate. I paid off the nurses. I thought it was over. Iphigenia stood up. He felt sick. His entire life with the boys had been built on a foundation of lies orchestrated by a dead woman's vanity. Who else knows? Iphigenia asked. Caldwell hesitated. His eyes darted to the side. Iphigenia caught the look. Rocco. Rocco stepped forward, drawing a serrated knife. Wait. Wait, Caldwell shrieked. Your mother knows. The silence in the room was absolute. Lucia, Iphigenia whispered. His mother. The matriarch. The woman who cooked Sunday gravy and knitted sweaters for the Triplets. She funded it, Caldwell whispered, defeated. Isabella didn't have access to that kind of cash without you knowing. Lucia paid me the second installment. She said a waitress wasn't fit to carry the Valenti heir. She wanted the bloodline secured, but she wanted the trash taken out. Iphigenia closed his eyes. The betrayal was absolute. His wife, his mother. They had conspired to steal a woman's children and gaslight him for 2 years. He opened his eyes. They were devoid of mercy. You're right, Leonard, Iphigenia said. The police aren't the answer here. You promised, Caldwell screamed. You said prison. I lied, Iphigenia said, turning his back. Just like you. He nodded to Rocco. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Burn the files. Iphigenia walked out of the house into the cool morning air. A single gunshot rang out behind him, muffled by the walls. He didn't flinch. He got into the car. Take me home. His phone buzzed. It was a text from the head of his security at the estate. Boss, We have a problem. Your mother just arrived at the gate. She says she's here to see the boys." Iphigenia stared at the phone. His grip tightened until the screen cracked. Lucia was there. Oliver was there. The two women at the center of the lie were under the same roof, and Oliver had no idea that the sweet old grandmother coming to visit was the one who had paid to erase her existence. "Drive faster," Iphigenia ordered. The Valenti nursery was a sanctuary of soft blues and creams, a stark contrast to the violence Iphigenia was dealing with across town. Oliver sat on the plush rug, her legs crossed. The triplets, Roman, Gabriel, and Julian, were clustered around her like little moons orbiting a planet. They were fully awake now, the terror of the night forgotten in the presence of the woman who smelled like safety. "And then," Oliver whispered, walking a toy horse up Gabriel's arm. The horse jumped over the moon. Gabriel giggled. It was a rusty, creaky sound, like a gate opening for the first time in years. Oliver's heart soared. The heavy oak door creaked open. Oliver turned with a smile, expecting Iphigenia. Instead, an older woman stood there. She was elegant, dressed in a sharp Chanel suit that cost more than Oliver would make in 10 lifetimes. Her silver hair was pulled back into a severe bun, and her eyes were cold, hard diamonds. It was Lucia Valenti, the matriarch. Lucia froze. She looked at the triplets, calm and happy. Then her gaze snapped to Oliver. For a second, Oliver saw shock on the older woman's face, a flicker of genuine fear. But it was instantly replaced by a mask of imperious rage. "Who are you?" Lucia demanded, stepping into the room. Her voice was like a whip crack. "And what are you doing with my grandsons? Where is the nanny?" Oliver scrambled to her feet instinctively, stepping in front of the boys. Mr. Valenti brought me here. I'm Oliver." Lucia's eyes narrowed. She recognized the name. She recognized the face. It was the face she had paid $50,000 to erase. "You?" Lucia hissed. She didn't ask how Oliver was alive. She didn't ask why she was there. She went straight to the offensive. "You are the help, the hired vessel. You have no business in this house." "I am their mother," Oliver said, her voice shaking but firm. Lucia laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You are an incubator, a petri dish we rented. You are nothing. Get away from them." Lucia marched forward, her hand raised as if to strike Oliver. The reaction from the boys was immediate. Roman the Protector scrambled up. He didn't run to his grandmother. He ran at her. He threw his small body against Lucia's legs, screaming. "No. No, go away." Lucia stumbled back, shocked. "Roman, stop this instant." Julian and Gabriel began to wail, clutching Oliver's legs. Mum, you've poisoned them," Lucia snarled, regaining her balance. She grabbed Oliver's arm, her nails digging into the flesh. "I don't know how you crawled back out of the gutter, you little rat, but I will throw you back in myself. Security." "Let go of me," Oliver cried, trying to pull away without hurting the children clinging to her. "I will have you arrested for trespassing," Lucia screamed, dragging Oliver towards the door. "I will have you buried, so deep, no one will ever find you again." "I don't think so, Mother." The voice came from the doorway. It was quiet, deadly, and colder than the grave. Lucia froze. She released Oliver's arm and spun around. Iphigenia stood there. He was drenched from the rain. His suit was ruined. His eyes were red-rimmed, but his expression was absolute zero. Behind him stood Rocco and 4 other armed guards. Iphigenia. Lucia smoothed her jacket, her heartbeat spiking. "Thank God you're here. This woman broke in. She's deranged. She's confusing the boys. I was just removing her." Iphigenia walked into the room. He didn't look at his mother. He walked straight to Oliver. He saw the red crescent marks on her arm, where Lucia's nails had dug in. He gently touched the spot. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. Oliver shook her head, breathless. "I'm okay. She tried to take them." Iphigenia turned slowly to face his mother. "She didn't break in, Mother. I brought her here. Because, unlike you, she didn't lie to me for 2 years. Lucia's face went pale. "Iphigenia, I don't know what she told you, but she's a grifter. She wants your money." "I just came from Dr. Caldwell's house," Iphigenia said. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucia stopped breathing. "He told me everything," Iphigenia continued, his voice rising, vibrating with suppressed fury. "He told me about the egg switch. He told me about the fake death certificate. He told me that you and Isabella decided that my sons didn't deserve a mother, because she served coffee for a living. It was for the family," Lucia shrieked, desperate now. "Isabella was weak. She couldn't give you an heir. We did what had to be done to secure the Valenti legacy. You needed strong blood, Iphigenia. But you couldn't be tied to a nobody, a peasant. She is the mother of your grandchildren," Iphigenia roared. The sound shook the walls. The triplets went silent, watching their father with wide eyes. "She is a loose end," Lucia yelled back. "I did it for you, to keep our world pure." "Pure," Iphigenia laughed bitterly. "You left my sons motherless. You watched them suffer. You watched me torture myself, thinking I was failing them. You let them go mute from trauma because you were too proud to let a waitress into the family." Iphigenia pointed to the door. "Rocco." "Yes, boss." "Escort Mrs. Valenti off the property." Lucia gasped. "Iphigenia, you can't. I am your mother." "You ceased to be my mother the moment you signed the kill order for the mother of my children," Iphigenia said. "You are stripped of your allowance. You are stripped of your keys. You will be driven to the convent in upstate New York. You will stay there. If you leave, if you contact the press, or if you ever come within 10 miles of Oliver or my sons again, I will forget that we share blood." "Iphigenia, please." Lucia was crying now, realizing her reign was over. "Get her out of my sight." Iphigenia turned his back. Rocco stepped forward, grabbing the matriarch by the elbow. It wasn't gentle. As she was dragged, screaming down the hallway, Iphigenia didn't flinch. He looked at Oliver. She was trembling, holding the boys close. The room was quiet again, save for the rain against the window. The King of New York had just dethroned his queen, and now he was standing before the only woman who mattered. The silence was gone. For 2 years, the Valenti estate had been a tomb. It was a place of marble floors that echoed with nothing but the click of Iphigenia's shoes and the stifled weeping of nannies who couldn't cope. It had been a fortress of solitude built to keep the world out and the misery in. But on this Saturday morning, the fortress had fallen. It had been conquered not by a rival family or a federal raid, but by the smell of burning butter and the shrieks of 3-year-olds. Iphigenia Valenti stood at the top of the grand staircase, tightening the belt of his robe. He paused, listening. "Mine, that's mine syrup. No Gabriel share. Mummy Julian bit me." A smile tugged at the corner of Iphigenia's mouth, a genuine reflex action that still surprised him when he caught his reflection in the mirror. He walked down the stairs, following the noise toward the kitchen. The sun was streaming through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The heavy velvet curtains, which had been drawn for years, were pulled wide open. He reached the kitchen doorway and leaned against the frame, content to watch for a moment before announcing his presence. The scene inside was pure, unadulterated chaos. The industrial-sized chef's kitchen, usually pristine enough to perform surgery in, looked like a bakery had exploded. Flour dusted the granite countertops like snow. Eggshells were scattered near the sink. And in the center of it all was Oliver. She was wearing one of his old dress shirts over her pajamas, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, her blonde hair tied back in a messy bun that was slowly unraveling. She was dual-wielding spatulas, defending a stack of pancakes from 3 ravenous little wolves. Back, you savages," she laughed, fending off Roman, who was trying to climb the kitchen island. "They aren't ready yet." Hungry, Roman roared his vocabulary, having expanded from 0 to a surprisingly bossy 300 words in just 6 months. "Bear pancake now. Doggy hungry too," Julian added, pointing to Bruno, the family's terrifying German shepherd, who was currently wagging his tail and licking a drop of batter off the floor. Iphigenia cleared his throat. The room froze. The boys turned. Oliver looked up, blowing a stray lock of hair out of her eyes. "Daddy!" The synchronized shout hit him in the chest. Before he could take a step, he was swarmed. Roman, Gabriel, and Julian abandoned their siege on the pancakes and sprinted toward him. Iphigenia crouched down just in time to catch them, absorbing the impact of 3 sturdy toddlers crashing into his arms. He buried his face in their curls, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo and maple syrup. "Good morning, Trouble," Iphigenia murmured, kissing each of them on the forehead. He looked at Gabriel, the one who had been the most withdrawn, the one the doctors said might never connect with anyone. Gabriel was grinning, clutching a toy car. "Daddy Mummy made face pancakes," Gabriel explained seriously. "But Roman ate the ear." "I did not," Roman protested. "Did too." "Okay, settle down," Iphigenia commanded gently, standing up and wading through the sea of children toward the stove. He came up behind Oliver, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. She leaned back into him instantly, a perfect fit. The tension of his work, the meetings with the commission, the territorial disputes, the constant threat of violence that defined his life outside these walls, evaporated the moment he touched her. "Morning, boss," she teased softly. "I thought we agreed to retire that title," he whispered, kissing the sensitive spot behind her ear. "Old habits," she hummed. "Coffee is in the pot, but don't drink from the blue mug." Julian put a dinosaur in it to see if it could swim. Iphigenia chuckled, releasing her to pour himself a cup, checking for prehistoric reptiles first. He leaned back against the counter, sipping the black coffee, watching her flip the last pancake. "How are you?" he asked, his voice dropping to a more serious register. Oliver paused. She looked out the window at the sprawling gardens. The grass was green, the flowers were blooming. It was a stark contrast to the grey, rainy world she had lived in for so long. "I'm happy," she said, turning to him. Her electric blue eyes searched his. "I never thought I'd say that, and mean it. But I am. Are you?" Iphigenia looked at his sons, who were now seated at the table, arguing over who got the blue plate. "I didn't know I was dead until you woke me up," Iphigenia said simply. It wasn't just a line. The last 6 months had been a war of a different kind. When Iphigenia had exiled his mother to the convent, it had caused a ripple effect in the underworld. Weakness was suspected. Rivals had tested the waters. But Iphigenia had crushed them with a ferocity that terrified even his own captains. He fought differently now. He wasn't fighting for power. He was fighting for a future. And then there were the lawyers. Reinstating Oliver's rights had been messy. The press had sniffed around. But Iphigenia had bought the silence of judges and journalists alike. Now Oliver was a ghost no more. She was a fixture. Speaking of happy, Oliver said, plating the pancakes and carrying them to the table. I heard from Sal yesterday. Iphigenia sat down at the head of the table, cutting Roman's pancake into bite-sized pieces. Sal, the diner owner. Yeah, he's officially moved to Boca. He sent me a postcard with a flamingo on it. Oliver sat down next to him. He said the sale of the diner fell through. The developers wanted to tear it down and build a parking lot. Sal refused. Iphigenia paused. He knew Sal's diner. It was a dump, but it was their dump. It was the place where 3 silent boys had found their voices. And Iphigenia prompted. Oliver hesitated. She traced the rim of her coffee cup. I was thinking, I don't want it torn down. I know it's just a greasy spoon, Iphigenia, but that's where I waited for them. For 2 years I waited in that diner, hoping maybe, just maybe, I'd see a stroller pass by. It's part of our story. What do you want to do? I want to buy it, Oliver said, her voice gaining strength. I want to renovate it. Keep the front as a diner. Maybe better food, though, but use the upstairs. The old storage rooms. I want to turn them into a transitional shelter for women like me. Women who have debts or dangerous exes or nowhere to go. A safe place. Iphigenia stopped eating. He looked at the woman sitting beside him. She could have asked for diamonds. She could have asked for a yacht or a villa in Tuscany. She asked for a run-down building to help people who had nothing. She was the conscience he had lost long ago. Iphigenia reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out his phone. He tapped out a quick message to his consigliere. Buy Sal's diner. Full asking price. Plus 20% for the trouble. Put the deed in Oliver Valenti's name. He set the phone face down on the table. Done, Iphigenia said. Oliver blinked. What do you mean, done? I mean, I just instructed Leo to buy it. Contractors will meet you there Monday morning. You can design it however you want. It's yours. Oliver's mouth fell open. Iphigenia, you can't just buy a building over breakfast. We haven't even discussed the budget or the logistics or... There is no budget, Iphigenia interrupted, reaching over to wipe a smear of syrup from her cheek. You gave me back my sons, Oliver. You can have 1,000 diners. You can have the whole damn city. Oliver stared at him, tears pricking her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Then she paused, her brow furrowing. Wait, did you say... Put it in whose name? Iphigenia froze. He replayed the text message in his head. Put the deed in Oliver Valenti's name. He hadn't even thought about it. It had been a reflex. In his mind, she was already the lady of the house. In his mind, she had been a Valenti since the moment she stood up to his mother in the nursery. The kitchen went quiet, save for the sound of Julian chewing loudly. Oliver Valenti. Oliver repeated slowly, testing the sound of it. She looked at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. Iphigenia set his fork down. He wiped his hands on a napkin. He looked at the flour on his sweater, the mess in the kitchen, the three boys watching him with wide, expectant eyes. He had planned to do this perfectly. He had a ring being custom-made in Antwerp, a 10-carat sapphire surrounded by diamonds. He had planned to take her to the cliffside villa in Amalfi next month. He wanted fireworks. He wanted music. But looking at her now with flower in her hair and love in her eyes, he realized that this was the perfect moment. The perfection wasn't in the grandeur. It was in the reality. He pushed his chair back and stood up. "Iphigenia?" Oliver asked, sensing the shift in the air. "Is something wrong?" "Yes," Iphigenia said. He walked around the table and stood in front of her chair. "The name is wrong. I can keep Rain if you want," she stammered, misunderstanding him. "I didn't mean to assume—" "No," Iphigenia said firmly. "The name on your driver's license is wrong. It says Oliver Rain, and that's a lie, because you don't belong to the Rain anymore. You belong to us." He slowly lowered himself onto one knee on the cold kitchen tiles. Oliver gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Roman dropped his fork. "Uh-oh. Daddy fall down." "Shh," Gabriel hissed, hitting his brother on the arm. "Daddy is doing the movie thing." Iphigenia ignored them. He took Oliver's hand. Her skin was warm, rough from work and trembling. "I don't have the ring yet," Iphigenia said, his voice rough with an emotion he usually strangled. "It's coming. It's big and heavy and ridiculous, just like everything else in my life, but I can't wait for the ring. I can't wait another second." "Iphigenia." Tears spilled over her lashes. "Oliver," he said, looking up at her with complete vulnerability. "You are the only person who ever looked at me and didn't see a monster. You saw a father. You walked into the darkness of this house and you turned on the lights. I love you. I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anything." He squeezed her hand. "Marry me. Be the mother of my children officially. Be the queen of this city. But mostly, just be mine." Oliver looked at him. She looked at the man who had kidnapped her, terrified her, and then protected her with a ferocity that shook the world. She looked at the boys who were beaming, sensing that something wonderful was happening. She slid off her chair, dropping to her knees so she was level with him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. "Yes," she sobbed into his sweater. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." Iphigenia let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for years. He wrapped his arms around her, lifting her up as he stood, spinning her around in the center of the chaotic, messy, beautiful kitchen. "Yay!" The triplets cheered, erupting into applause because the noise level had gone up. "Group hug!" Julian screamed, launching himself at his parents' legs. Roman and Gabriel followed suit. Iphigenia laughed a deep, booming sound as he and his fiancée were tackled by their children. They collapsed into a pile on the floor, covered in flour, sticky with syrup, and surrounded by love. Outside the city of New York continued to grind on, full of danger and noise. But inside the gates of the Valenti estate, the war was over. The waitress had saved the king, and the king had finally found his home. And that is the incredible story of how a simple cup of spilled coffee changed the fate of the Valenti Empire forever. From a terrified waitress in a run-down diner to the queen of the Mafia and the mother of 3 beautiful boys, Oliver found her voice and helped the triplets find theirs. Love truly is louder than fear. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. Let's see if we can hit 10,000 likes for Oliver's happy ending. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. What should our next story be about? A billionaire's secret bodyguard or a runaway princess? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.